afternoon, everyone, and welcome to what promises to be a deeply moving and enlightening conversation. Our topic today is called Entwined Histories, Uncovering the Ties That Bind Our Descendants of Enslavers and the Enslaved. It is a conversation grounded not only in history, but in humanity. We are here to explore what happens when we peel back the layers of the past, when descendants of enslaved individuals and enslavers come face to face with the intertwined legacies of slavery, ownership, resilience, and of course, survival. Genealogy is not only about tracing bloodlines, it is also about filling in the silences, confronting uncomfortable truths, reclaiming stories that have been attempted to be erased. Today's panelists exemplify this work. I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves and tell them where they're coming in from. And I'm going to start with Keme. But before I do that, Keme, this is really your legacy here as far as the other connections. Can you first tell me, before we get started on all the introductions, just how this got started? And then after that, tell us the connections. We've got Bernice Bennett, who's a professional genealogist, and Jamila, an attorney that connects also with your family. So I'm going to let you lead off with that and go from there.
Dr. Murphy, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. My name's Keme Nzerem, and I am joining you from sunny London, England. Where did this start? Well, just before I get there, I really need to pay homage to all three of you amazing women who have really taken me on a journey that I never knew I needed to take. And in a sense, that is the beginning of the story. So I'm culturally British. I grew up here in London, even though I was born in Zambia. That is a very long story that I won't go into. My father is Nigerian and my mother is American. She's from DC. And her heritage is German and English. But her family are from the South, from South Carolina and Louisiana. And growing up, I was very proud of both bits of my heritage, my Nigerian heritage and my white American heritage, but I didn't really engage with what it meant to have American heritage from the South. And I'm not sure if that's naive or just it didn't come up. And part of this story actually is that these very complex histories of enslavement in the UK actually is very different here. Slavery was not embedded in the soil, in the brickwork, in the same way that it is in the States, because it was offshored. It was offshored to the Caribbean. And there is a veil. There is a block that means that most Brits grow up having very little understanding that actually the Brits didn't abolish. I mean, they were obviously involved in abolishing slavery, but actually the Brits created it. That history is elided, it's hidden. So I grew up, my father was a lawyer, my mum was a teacher, I was a journalist. I grew up kind of thinking that my family and my people and I was on the right side of history, right? The work that I did as a journalist was about promoting Black issues a lot of the time, and we were good people. Anyway, I got a bit older, and some of that family history stuff that I had kind of ignored when I was a kid, because when you're younger, you don't so much look at this, right. Uncles and aunties will send you documents and, hey, someone's Bible from so long ago you don't know, and pictures of people that you've never met. It doesn't mean anything, right? I became a father, and suddenly all this stuff, I'm like, oh, this is quite interesting, right? Anyway, an email arrived, stuff in it, family stuff, documents, scans of a will, and it sat in my email for ages. I was like, oh, I remember that. Let me take a look at it again. And I took a look at it again, and honestly, the contents changed everything for me. I'm not sure about it. It's gone. The contents of that email really confronted me. It really was like a hammer blow.
So it really came from an email.
It genuinely came from an email.
Okay.
My uncle sent me a bunch of stuff. Hey, I've got some stuff. Take a look at it when you're ready, kind of thing. This is my mother's younger brother. Lovely guy. One of the emails was a will, 1829 will of my fourth great grandfather, John Reinhardt of Edgefield County, and Edgefield will become the reason why I say that will become clear in a moment. And I was reading it, not really knowing what I'd never read anything like this before, but I was curious. I bequeathed to my wife, you know, kind of horses and hogs and and then you know where this is going. Really the words that changed my world, 2 Negroes. And I thought, my God, this is my people. How can this be me? And I really didn't know how to process that. But to cut a very long story short, I went to the Smithsonian and showed them the will. They have a family research center, of course, as you will know. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't know what to do. What do I do with this? I think I want to find out more, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know who to speak to. I think that I really want to know what happened to those individuals that are named, because in the will they actually named people. It wasn't just numbers. So that was something that really humanized it for me, very, very immediately. And I said, I think I'd like to try and connect with the descendants, but is that even okay? I don't this is totally new ground for me. And they said, Bernice Bennett.
I love it.
Edgefield County. She's your woman. She's your girl.
Yes.
So I found Bernice Bennett on the internet. Hello, I'm this guy from London and I've got this and I don't know what to do and help. And that was what, 6-7 years ago?
Yeah. I love it.
That was the beginning for me. That was the beginning for me.
Okay. So now, professional genealogist Bernice Alexander Bennett. So you all know I know her very well now. And we're kicking good 20-some years about now. But tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you host a podcast, and then we'll make the connection to Jamila.
Okay. Yes, I do host the podcast, but you want to know a little bit about me?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I am a native of New Orleans. I grew up around family. I grew up around tradition. I grew up around culture. This is my maternal line. My paternal line was from South Carolina. My father was born in 96, South Carolina. I knew
the old district, 96?
Yes.
Okay.
And I knew very little about South Carolina and decided to go on this journey to connect with the living. So we're talking over 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. As I began to do my own research, I then stumbled upon the fact that my family members were from Edgefield County, South Carolina. Now, from a genealogical perspective, that means you don't just find the name of the place, at least I didn't. I decided to immerse myself in everything about Edgefield. I joined the Edgefield, Old Edgefield District Genealogical Society, the South Carolina Genealogical Society. I also, of course, joined AUGS, the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society. My goal was to understand everything. In the looking for the living, I also started looking at what was being put on Afrogenius. You remember Afrogenius?
Oh, yes.
Found someone with my surname, my father's mother's surname, and discovered that her grandfather, her great grandfather, and my grandmother were brother and
Oh
sister.
my goodness.
Okay. We then decided we needed to know even more about our family, traced our family back to 1870, but continued this dialogue with the folks at the old Edgefield District Genealogical Society, to the point where we were visiting the society. And a woman there by the name of Dr. Connie McNeil began to explain to us some of the issues in this slave owning community, to the point where she provided us with wills and deeds. And on there, we saw individuals with price tags associated with them. They were property. Well, that property ended up being my great great grandfather, and Dr. McNeil's family were the enslavers of my family. And so that's my history with Edgefield. I've spent lots of time in Edgefield County, South Carolina.
All right. Okay. Jamila Smith,
Yes. ma'am.
newly attorney at law. Jamila Smith, please tell us about yourself and how you're connecting with Keme.
Well, like you said, I'm Jamila Smith. I'm here in North Carolina today, but I grew up and was raised in South Jersey, right across the bridge from Philadelphia. And my journey for me is kind of like twofold. My biological father passed away when I was 7, and that kind of instilled in me a desire to know where he came from, so I could know a little bit about myself. And then I remember one time my grandma was in the hospital and her sisters were around her. They were having a conversation about how do you spell the last name Reinhardt, because their maiden name was Reinhardt, and there's still a significant amount of my family members that carry the last name Reinhardt, and some spelled it with the RH, most of them spell it without the H, and they were just trying to figure out, where does the name Reinhardt come from, because it became something so important and significant in our family, and so many of us still carry the name Reinhardt. And my grandmother's mother passed away when she was a child of tuberculosis, and their father had already passed away, Michael Reinhardt. And so they were just kind of trying to piece some of that information together, because I think having my grandmother in the hospital brought home to them that they may not be around forever. So they wanted to try to preserve some of that information for their children. And I just so happened to be there listening to them talk with their own desire in my own heart to know who I am and want the answers to. And I was just waiting with bated breath, like, what would I hear? Unfortunately, I didn't hear much because they didn't know much, right? So in high school, I just started building a family tree. I've heard about ancestry, I think, through some presentation at school, got right on it, and just started researching my family, tried to take what I knew about my biological father's family and did that. I took the ancestry DNA test just for information. I'm finding out all this information. I have ties in North Carolina, where I found my grandfather, my mother's father, where his family is from in North Carolina, and the interesting stories behind that. And then I found the Reinhardt line, even though there are some holes in documentation, because my family is kind of scaredy a little bit. I wouldn't call them census dodgers, but they try not to leave too much of a mark. Even when I was looking at records, I was like, man, that's a really strong family trait, because that particular line of my family, the documentation that they left behind isn't always there. Whereas like on my biological father's side of the family, when I took the DNA test, I found everything, because they're all on Ancestry. they have all the documents uploaded. So I was just like, the skepticism is real on my mom's side of the family. But anyway, so fast forward a bit, I'm in the rabbit hole, probably got like 1,000 people on my family tree. And I received this message, this email from Bernice, and it had a link to her blog podcast with Keme in it. And I remember I immediately called my mom. I was like, Mom, got this weird email. They say they're looking for us, but it has this video, and I watched like 5 minutes of it, and I think it's legit. Can you watch it with me?
I love this.
So I literally like rewound the video, and we watched it together. And we got done, and of course my mom is still skeptical. She's like, I was like, well, while I'm watching it, should be working, but I'm like enthralled, right?
Right.
And the researcher in me is just interest is peaked. So I'm Googling Bernice and Keme. I'm like,
making sure they're legit people.
Making sure they're not killers, because that's the first.
Yeah. I've got my chainsaw, man.
Because if you reach out, you have those
Right.
kinds of fears, like, yeah, they reached out to me, but I don't know these people from a can of paint. So it's like just try to find out what it is I'm dealing with here.
Right.
Which was also my mom's suggestion. She's like, before we involve the greater family network, let's see what's going on. I was talking to her about it. I reached back out to Bernice after I hung out with my mom. Even though my mom said to wait a little bit, I was too interested. I reached out to Bernice immediately. And I think the rest is history. I feel really blessed to have the opportunity to participate and get the information I never thought would be possible, because as an African American, you're told that there's this wall in your lineage that you'll never be able to overcome and get any information about past, the wall of slavery.
Sure.
So to even get any insight, especially with the records being what they were, I mean, there's more records available now, but at that time, being what the records were, I was like, there were some questions that I couldn't answer as just an amateur sleuth family genealogist.
But you did good.
I spent hours. I was even tell you, I would be up at night because once I was introduced to the people in the documents, I wanted to find out more about who they were, where they came from, where they grew up, what were the things, kind of to contextualize them as people again and make them people and not just names on a document anymore. So when I connected with Bernice, and she's like, well, I have a whole bunch of information.
I love it. Well,
it was awesome.
That leads me to the next question for all of you. So thank you for that. Hopefully we've set the stage here so people get a little bit of the connection. And also for the audience, the people that are listening, please put your questions in the chat and we will get to them, later after this discussion. So right now, for each of you, if you'll take 1 or 2 minutes and describe how you realized your ancestors were directly connected through the institution of slavery, what emotions surfaced for you? And how did you process those revelations? And I'm calling them revelations because looking at how Keme responded when he said, looking at that will, and I was like, what is this, type thing. And I think there's a lot of us that reach that point and we don't know what to do. But how did each of you, and I'll start back with Keme and go Bernice and then Jamila, share with us what emotions came about and how did you handle that?
So this answer comes on many levels, but first, maybe just some specifics on what we eventually discovered the connection was, just to kind of complete that circle.
Great.
And Jamila, please, all of you, if I've got this slightly wrong, please correct me. So Jamila mentioned an ancestor of hers named Michael Reinhardt. My mother's maiden name is Reinhardt. Bernice found a document that we thought suggested an adoption link that Jamila suspected, because there had been what they thought was likely an adoption, and Michael had moved and been taken care of by another branch of the family. I'm trying to condense this to make it understandable. These paths led to somebody that we discovered in the wider family group that had been enslaved by the Reinhardts, called Peter or Patrick. And we deduced that Michael was likely the son of Peter or Patrick. And Peter Patrick was in my family in a census, but very likely enslaved by the Reinhardts. So that's a very, very abridged version of the research, which, as everyone listening knows, is always really often very, very complex. So how did I react? What was going through my mind? At the beginning, I was very sad. I was shocked. I felt deeply confused and guilty that my own blood had been part of something that I considered to be one of the greatest crimes against humanity that we've ever done to ourselves as humans. And I couldn't comprehend. I didn't know where to go with that, what to do with it. But I think what I did know was that for me as a Black man, that I needed to process this. And I thought that I needed to do that by trying to connect with the people that were on the other side of this awful story. But I didn't know how to do that safely, because it didn't feel to me to be fair to just kind of like knock on someone's door and say, hey,
yeah,
we're connected like this, let's hang out. I didn't know how to go on this journey. And that was where Bernice's incredible expertise and kindness and warmth and mentorship really helped me. And her very, very clear guidance was, you have to share everything you know, without qualification. And you don't know whether that information is going to be useful to somebody else. And if those people are looking, then that's great. And also expect nothing back, right? Expect nothing back.
Yes.
Don't be doing this. Like it's, I have my own needs. That's fine. But gifting the knowledge that I have, that costs me nothing. And maybe something will come back. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but that's what you got to do. So that's what we did do. Wonderfully, Jamila was looking for her own answers, and very, very wonderfully for me, was willing to meet. There's another sub story to this. I'm a filmmaker, so I have been filming this entire journey, which adds another layer of complexity, because do you want to meet, and are you okay if we film it?
Yeah.
It's a lot, right? It's a very difficult arena, emotionally and traumatically, into which we are swimming around. I'll just describe the moment that we actually met, because it was one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced. I had flown back to South Carolina after collating quite a lot of information about what we knew about Peter Patrick Reinhardt and the connection to Jamila, which actually she had anyway. And we agreed to meet with another family who we had realized intersected with the arts via enslavement.
He froze a little bit there. Okay, he froze. So I'm going to throw it over to Bernice. As far as you finding those connections, or even your own family in South Carolina, and how did you react?
It was a shock. Although I had been doing research and talking to my cousins, and we were invited to the Old Edgefield District Genealogy Society's library to learn more about our family, I did not expect to find out that the person that was sharing the information was a descendant. I did not expect to see documentation with my ancestors listed with a price tag, or find out the whole history. So it was something that it hit me. It was reality. It was there. It was upfront. It was personal. It was, wow.
Life-changing.
It was definitely life-changing. It was something that I came to realize in learning about my own family, that if I encountered anyone else that was searching for descendants of the enslaved, or in fact, they were a descendant of an enslaver, the first thing I would say is go public.
Yes.
Because how would someone even know that you, the descendant of the enslaver, has documentation if you don't share it?
Right.
You must share the information, but you also need to know and learn as much as you can about your own family. If you don't study the records that you have found, then you're not really helping somebody else. You just
helping yourself.
Right. So that was kind of part of my discussion with Keme. Go public, go to the home place. He's in London. Got to come here. Meet the people here. Go to the archives. Meet the archivist. Look at the original documents. He received something by email. Touch the documents that your ancestors had a breath over.
Yeah.
Walk the town square. I brought in some of my genie friends to talk to him. Also, Dr. McNeil, who was the descendant of the enslaver of my family, talked to Keme. So he came in. I guess I don't know if you expected all of this or not, but
I can't imagine.
Like, don't call me if you don't want to. Not really. But I mean, I had to also be gentle and kind and understand that he was on a mission.
Yeah.
And that as a genealogist, I was going to work through this process with him so that when we did come across the descendants, he would be prepared to share what he had, but we would also have an opportunity to prepare the descendants so that they would know when they came together that they were coming together with a purpose, and a purpose that would make everybody whole. And for Jamila and her family, they were there to learn and to become whole. And for Keme, he was there to give, to share, to say, this is who I am. I am a descendant of these people, but I'm also a part of this community.
Right.
Of people willing to
that there was a lot of tips that I hope folks will take advantage of from each of you so far. So now, Jamila,
Yes.
hold on.
So definitely, Bernice is like the tie that binds the whole thing together. When she first reached out to me, of course I was shocked, but more than anything, I was excited. I had mentioned I had received some information from my other side of my family, and I knew that someone reaching out could mean more information, more access. So I was excited. And I think that the excitement kind of carried me through most of the early process. It wasn't until we met in South Carolina that the emotional side of the process kind of hit me. To be in the place where my ancestors were enslaved, to hold the documents with their names on it, to touch the water that their hands would have drawn water from to water the crops, to just being there to touch the dirt, to see the sign with their last name on it on the street sign, to stand under that, to just walk the land. That is when emotionally I was moved, because I'm like very academically minded, so I approached the whole thing with the thought of like research, how we find more information, how do we contextualize this, and I was very excited, but I found myself moved in ways I should have known, that I didn't expect. Once I got to South Carolina, and I felt humbled, and I felt a sense of fulfillment that I didn't even know that I needed, right? It's just the longing that I didn't know that I had was fulfilled, going through that. And while I'm talking about it now, I I feel moved, just thinking about it. And I honestly believe I came back from South Carolina changed, being able to meet the other Reinhardts that stayed in South Carolina. I when I tell people about my experience, I tell them, like, I've never been in a place that felt more like home than South Carolina. So many of my roots are there. You walk down the street, the people look like you. they look like family members, and even some of the white Reinhardts that we met, everybody has glasses. The older people have bad knees, like we do on our side of the family. Like, there's a connection there,
Sure.
that's undeniable, but has remained hidden for so long. And honestly, I commend Keme, and I feel like it's the documents landed in his lap for a divine purpose.
Yes.
Because so many people have the information, and they do nothing with it. But I think it is the fact that he identifies as a Black man, and to hold these records, and to have the history and the connection that he has, and the professional skill set that he has, to want to tell the story, to want to know how to reach out to someone like Bernice and the Smithsonian, to make that information available to me and my family. When I tell you, when we were in the Edgefield Historical Society, there was not a dry eye in the place. I mean, I even think for my aunts and my mom to hold the documents,
Sure.
it was like at that moment they realized why I didn't let this go, why I just kept going. Like, we had a family meeting, and they're like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, when they held the documents, everybody got it.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of surreal. You just kind of write off the idea of ever getting to know these things.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that opportunity was life-changing, honestly.
So hearing what all three of you have said, and I'm going to make sure, because if it's not clear, it's clear to me now more than ever. You're here because your people survived this.
Right. Absolutely.
So you're representing the resilience in that survival, whichever side you're on, either the slaveholder or the enslaved. Because we're examples of them that made it, I'm going to say, because there are a lot of them that didn't, but we're also doing this type of work. We're given voice and human. And when Keme made the statement, the property, or, in the beginning there, when he realized those Negroes, that was people, now you got names, you got location, and now they have a voice, and they're not going to be forgotten. So thank you all for that. And I say that as a fellow researcher. So I'm going to direct this question somewhat to Bernice, but and comment if y'all have anything to add. But Bernice, we know there's challenges doing African ancestry, African American ancestry. And some of those challenges might be gaps or silences that people could encounter in their research. Jamila mentioned the 1870 brick wall per se. Well, we squash that every day, to make sure that's not a myth, because African Americans can find information on their ancestry prior to 1870. So could you share some of the challenges that are typically found that helped bring life to what you were finding in a document or whatever? And did anybody get free or anything like that? Was there anything that challenged you that stopped you from getting something else? And the typical stuff with our genealogy.
Right. Well, I want to go to the actual documents that Keme had. So there were several different transactions and different names associated with those transactions. And so we couldn't go with the assumption that all of those people in the inventories would carry the Reinhardt name. They could have been a Kaufman. They could have been something else, because those transactions were taking place within his family. So that was a challenge right there. Who do we look for? And do we look for all of the people on the list, or do we look for maybe one or two people on the list? And, Kame's mother even stepped in, and she put together a spreadsheet, and we started looking, because we were doing reverse genealogy. We started with the inventory to move forward, rather than, whereas with Jamila's family, it would be she's moving back in time. We're going the other way around. And so that was a challenge right there. And it just meant to just keep looking and looking at names. And then in some way, it was great that, there was a Jamila. But because he went public, others started reaching out, saying, I'm a Reinhardt, and this is who my family members are. But it also meant doing the genealogy on each of those families to make certain that we were getting back to that inventory, that list of people.
Right.
So,
and I think that's critical, because in some sense, you guys were piecing a puzzle together.
Absolutely.
And so all the input and the others that came forward are bringing those connections together. So, Jamila, when you were starting this research per se, did you face any challenges? Or at that time, was there anything that you questioned that challenge, or that was missing? You know what I mean?
Yes. I questioned a lot. A lot of it was my sanity. No, I'm just kidding. Yes. No, but I definitely had challenges, because my family is the silent type. We don't talk about unpleasant things. Even to this day, we have a challenge talking about unpleasant things. We prefer to pass through life kind of jovially, and so there wasn't a lot by way of family, like history that had been passed along. So I was kind of out here on my own trying to piece this together, talking to like my grandmother's sister and her older sister, and trying to, and like she said, she's like, I'm 90 years old. So I have to reach very far back in my memory for these things. And just trying to get the answers to the questions when some of the people are no longer here. Like Michael Reinhardt was my grandmother's father, but he had already passed on. And because they learned their silence from the generation before them, he didn't talk about himself. So the family story was that he was brought from South Carolina to Pennsylvania through that adoption situation, which is where Bernice found our family on the census record that literally lists Michael Reinhardt, my grandmother, her sisters, and her brother on that document. And the family that he lived with was on a different document, so you're able to piece all that together. But even till this day, we don't know who his parents are. We saw on the documents like the grandchildren listed in the household of the person listed on Keme's documents. And we were able to kind of piece that all together through the family story that they was taken in by other family members and they're related to them. And then the ancestry DNA kind of ties it in together when they found other descendants that I'm related to biologically, and just being able to piece all of that kind of together really helped. But I mean, I still have questions. Like, I would love to be able to put a name to his parents and tie it with a neat bow. But unfortunately, unless more information comes forward, that there's some things about the research that you just have to accept that you may never know, which is heartbreaking, but a reality that you have to live with, you know. So yes, I definitely have.
No, very valid. So Bernice, and then I got a good question for Keme. Bernice, tell me about Edgefield's documents and records. Is that a Byrne County for South Carolina?
No, Edgefield County did not burn. The records are in a wonderful archive, the original documents.
Really?
The knowledge of the people in the archives is amazing. They can give you the history, tell you about the documentation. And there's a publication called The Slave Records of Edgefield County. And this is an index that was put together by the late Gloria Ramsey Lucas. And in this index, she spent 5 years of her time going through those records in the archives to put together this index. Keme's folks are in there. My people are in there. But it's a book that's available to assist people to at least get an idea of where they could go. It tells you what box the stuff is in. It tells you whether there's something called MVG, no value given, and there's also the value given. They'll tell you the current owner and the previous owner. I mean, so you have that as a guide to at least start looking for folks in Edgefield. And that book is also now on Ancestry.
Amazing. So I want to make sure folks that are researching old 96th District, Edgefield, to make sure that they realize there are records there. Because some counties in other states and also South Carolina, there might not be some records there. So could you just name a few of the archival type records? You mentioned, you know, those lists, the things that have been most useful in the research. that a descendant would be looking for if they were researching? And I'm going to just say generally, but use the Edgefield as the example since we're focusing there.
Well,
and then I'm going to come to you, Keme.
they have wills, they have deeds, they have property records. They also have family books which is located in the library. The library is in Johnston, South Carolina. It has moved. But the point is when you reach out to that genealogical society, which I did by phone and in writing, and said what I was looking for, they said black or white.
Oh.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yes.
I've never got that question.
Yes, because they have the information on the families.
Wow.
Yes. So when I reached out and I could give my name and say what I was looking for,
Sure,
they knew who I was.
They knew exactly.
Right.
Wow.
So this is, I would definitely tell people, and it's a blanket recommendation. Join your local genealogical societies. Learn what your historical societies have, because that's your opportunity to learn even more. But also make it a point to visit the home place. Don't do all your stuff online. Go to the community, walk around that community, feel the spirit of your ancestors as you begin your research journey.
So you're making a good point. Number one, go local. Attach yourself, because everything that's online, I love saying this, everything that Ancestry, Family Search, and them got online, they had to go to the local area to get it. It's a convenience that we have now. But again, the purpose and the message is for you to go there and walk those grounds and so forth. So thank you for that.
And there's a value to that.
Yes.
I did not expect to be moved the way I was, to be in the room with the documents. There is a value to putting yourself in the space.
Even if there's not a name and they're talking about, say, the slaves or the Negroes or whatever it is, you feel it, and I do that with my own research. So, Keme, when you first encountered this information, did you go to Mama first, or Mama and Daddy? And what was Mama's reaction?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you raised my parents. That they have both been so incredibly helpful, for reasons that I'll explain. But just to also point to a couple of points that Jamila and Bernice have made. Bernice, go local. Jamila, touching the water, being where your ancestors were. So when we first discovered this, both of my parents said, this is important stuff. Do not flinch. It will be hard, but if you're feeling the calling to understand what happened, then this is you, and you must do that. Actually, it gets much deeper than that, because my dad said, if you're going to look into the American side, which you should, you really should look into the Nigerian side too, because he had heard stories when he was a child from his father, from his elders, that our clan, the Arrow people, and we're a kind of sub clan of the Igbo, which is one of the main one of the main tribes in Nigeria, that our clan had been involved. Well, we were traders, market traders, and there was a thriving Arrow empire. But one of the things that the Arrow people bought and sold was human beings. And my dad had heard these stories, and he didn't know whether it was true or not. He just heard rumors, and a lot of these rumors. And I just wanted to. I've noticed that I think I have a few cousins who've dialed in from Nigeria and Canada. So hello, the full fam. It's really nice to know that people are interested in all this stuff, and all of, this is a global story, right?
Yes.
So Dad had heard these rumors that principally were connected to a shrine, a very important shrine, an oracle that was quite powerful, and one of the functions of the shrine were to dispense justice, and the ultimate penalty in those days was execution or sacrifice. And the story that my father had heard was that somehow the priests who ran the system had been corrupted by greed, because domestic enslavement had always existed in West Africa, as it had in many parts of the world. But when that system changed, and you had this hugely disruptive arrival of Europeans on the coast demanding industrialized slavery, which was a completely different thing. It changed so much about the internal dynamics of Nigerian economies, polities, and societies. The priests that ran the shrine, apparently, my dad had heard, began to conduct basically fake executions.
Oh.
So people would be condemned to death.
Yes.
The execution was meant to take place behind closed doors. The priest would slaughter a goat instead. The people that had come to see justice be done, because there was some visibility, would watch the river. The river would flow red. They would assume that the individuals had been executed, but in fact, they were just bashed on the head and chucked in a boat and sent down the river to Calabar to then be trafficked and then enslaved. So to put all of this in a very in a way that really centers me and on both lines of my ancestry very uncomfortably in this history. The vast majority of people that were trafficked by the British from my part of Nigeria, so that set of trafficked persons, the vast majority of them ended up in Charleston.
Wow.
In South Carolina. Which is where my mother's ancestors had settled. So father's family involved in father's clan involved in the facilitating trafficking to South Carolina. Mother's family arrived there. We arrived at the crushing, awful realization that it was entirely possible that the same people that my father's ancestors had kidnapped were then enslaved by my mother's ancestors in South Carolina. And it made me feel just, I don't
even know how you even get a feeling out of that. On both sides, to understand that, but also to process it. Is there any recommendations that you could make to folks that might be in a similar case, or just being the descendants of the enslaver or descendants of the enslaved, of how to handle this type, and I'm going to call it trauma. And Jennifer made a comment, but generational trauma, and there's a lot of studies that have been about that. Is there any recommendations you would like to share, or Jamila also, or Bernice add in after him, that to share to handle this? Because there's a few of us that do slave era research daily. And it is some kind of a process, but it does affect.
Yeah, of course. It's there are so many different ways to answer that. And if I just start with, I guess, why in some ways for me the talking has the journey has been very useful for me.
Yes.
I'm a journalist by trade, and so I am used to removing emotion from my storytelling, because I'm a news journalist, and in my storytelling I really try, and conventionally, if I'm reporting for the news, I try and enable the people that are watching my stories make their own conclusions. So on the one hand, what I wanted to do in telling this story was to approach everything without judgment. I'm not judging. I just want to find out what happened.
Sure.
Truth is really,
Which
really
will link
important.
to Jamila's point too of trying to find out
What happened, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And the manifest unfairness that lies underneath all of this is that I've always known where my people come from.
Sure.
If I wanted to know about my who great granddad blah was, I'd ask my dad, and he'd say, "Okay, well, if I don't know, we'll call Auntie Ngozi, and she'll tell you." Because, and obviously on the white side, in a document in a document chasing sense, it's much easier. You know, it doesn't take very long for me to go online and discover that my white ancestors arrived in Charleston from the UK via Germany on the Caledonia in 1752, which was all that information is.
Yep, you got so, yes, yeah.
But just to underline something that Bernice said that is just so important, and even more important in the Nigerian context, where actually we don't have the documents. Oral history is so powerful. It is so important, and it manifests in incredibly textured ways. So when dad said, we've got to go to Nigeria and find out, we've got to speak to the priests. And in doing so, we went to we actually went to like a big harvest festival, one of the big festivals of the year. And part of that festival is the diasporic Arrow clans come back with costume and performance. It's very much like the kind of masquerade festival that you might get in Trinidad or Rio or in London. And the clans return to Arachuku with their clan stories. So you get oral history, not just in terms of talking to people and asking them, can you tell me about my ancestors, but in song and in dance and in theater. And if you don't go, if you don't put your metaphorical foot in the water, if you don't touch the metaphorical document, then how will you ever know?
Sure. Jamila?
Yeah. The funny thing is that I got to see that part of Keme's journey pretty early on in the process. I think he had some type of snippet of that. And it was the first time that I had ever really seen a part of Africa where my ancestry could have come from, or heard of how the deed was done. How did they actually traffic people out? And that's part of the reason why I will forever be grateful for Keme, because without that tie, where do we, like he said, where do we get that information from, that context from, and really be able to understand both sides? You know, it's an important story to tell. And I agree, like, unless you're there or you have someone like Keme who's curious and tenacious enough to keep following the breadcrumbs, you may never completely understand what it is. And I had the fortune of being able to put a story, more story than I ever had, to these people and where they come from. And we actually had a ceremony at the gravesite of where we think some of my ancestors were buried, which was also so very meaningful, that Keme's dad had put together for us, or helped Keme put together. I would encourage anyone who, whether you're on the side of the descendants of the enslaver or the enslaved, to engage in the process, right? Because you need both sides to get the full story.
Great point.
Without Keme being there as a middle person, I don't think we would have ever gotten that information. Yes, though the records were there, we didn't know that. Like we didn't know that. It's interesting to hear that the genealogist there had spent 5 years cataloging that information. She didn't know us at all, and she had already invested 5 years in that information to help us be able to contextualize and be able to see our ancestors in these documents. And when you go there, there's a lot of documents.
Yeah.
The gravity of how much work they've invested and the wealth of knowledge that they have is astounding. And if we had, without them, I know I couldn't have walked in there and found anything without the pre-work. So I would just encourage anyone who has the desire to do it. Like Amy said, it costs you nothing.
Right.
And yes, there were emotions that come up and that did come up. And you have to sit with that and process that and deal with that. But like my mom says, you have to take the good with the bad, right? I wouldn't have been able to experience all the good that came out, and even the relationship that I have with Bernice and Keme, and without being open to seeing where this journey would take me. I didn't know when I answered Bernice where this was going, but just being open to the idea that there may be something to this, even if I don't end from the beginning, being able to stand in the church that the other Reinhardts built right after slavery to have some place to worship and us all sing together. It's funny that Keme mentioned the festival and how they share their family tradition through music, and to think about how the arts and music is so prevalent in our family, and to know that so many people from his area in Nigeria ended up in Charleston, it's pretty amazing.
And you both of you have made such good points. And Bernice, you've said it more than once, that you just have to tell it. And I'm saying it that way. Whatever you find, you got to tell it. You got to share it. And everything I'm hearing from the Descendants is really saying the same thing. And yes, I have to process this step by step. But would you also recommend to folks that they also tell their emotional aspects of that and their experience, along with just the story? You know what I mean? Would you also tell them, like we heard Jamila, not a dry eye in the place, but to share that along with the document and this, that, and other, whatever she was feeling? And you as a genealogist, would you encourage that and help people? Because I think there might be not healing, but there might be a way to process and deal with what you're feeling or what you might struggle with, or just how we receive. And Jamila, that information was waiting for you to show up.
Right.
We'll say it that way.
That's how it felt too.
Yeah, it was waiting for you. That 5 years of work is waiting for people to come in there and find their people, per se. So Bernice, I'll throw it back to you. You're on mute.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We got one. That's first one today.
When you start thinking of folks going through this stage of thinking we're going to be erased, that we never existed. And one of the things I want to make certain that we get across is there's something that goes with accountability.
Yes.
And accountability begins with acknowledgement that, yes, you are a descendant of an enslaver. Don't let fear prevent you from sharing the information that you have. Accepting the truth, back to you, Jamila, of your ancestors, and understanding that they went through something, but they survived. you know, we throw in the word resilience. Yes, it does cause some very painful feelings, but we also, you have the good and you have the bad. With the descendants of enslavers, you have to be active. You have to say what you need to say. Don't just talk about your family's wealth without talking about how they became wealthy. Don't talk about all that land they had without recognizing that they had human property that made that land what it became. We have such an opportunity in this country to right the wrong and say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done, and make certain that our libraries, our museums, our archives, all of the information in those places must be a safe place for everybody to access. And that this is not information that should not be presented to people, should not be available to people. And I can get on my soapbox right now by saying, don't touch my records, share my records, leave it out there, let it be accessible so that people like us can tell our family stories and, yes, say their names and talk about the context in which our family members were brought here. They were not, there was no migration. There's no immigration. There's forced migration. And they were put on labor camps. And so we just need to say what needs to be said and talk to each other. This is American history. It's our history.
Definitely.
And I think just to add something to that, I think that I'm continually searching for ways to explain either the kind of emotional or rational reasons behind getting to a stage in my life where I guess I knew I needed to do something and I didn't know what it was that I needed to do. And I think what I have learned is the weight of all this history requires those of us who are descended of enslavers and do know our history to do what we can to make sure that people who have gaps in their family knowledge, it's on us, man. Come on. It's on us to help other families find out what we have that is priceless. Knowing where you came from. This is not a thing with dollar signs. Unfortunately, dollar signs came to value something that should never have been valued like that. But knowing where you come from, if you can help with that.
That's the thrill of my job with the work I do here in the States, is to make that connection. That if I find there's a connection with, say, a potential descendant, and being able to share that I feel I have done my job, for them to see that there was a person that they came from and this is their story, as much as I can, or bringing together the two of us and then we find that connection. So I think that's very powerful. And I'm going to do one last question to you and whoever wants to answer it, and then we'll go to the Q&A from the audience. But looking ahead, how do you envision the future of descendant-led dialogues? And matter of fact, we'll have a future podcast, I believe it's in August, where we have descendant-led groups. But how do you envision the future of descendant-led dialogues? What are the next steps that we need to take collectively to make sure those stories are uncovered, but also honored and respected and understood and preserved? So whoever wants to take that on, because we're looking at Jamila and we're looking at Keme. You are descendants. So is there an opportunity that the descendant-led dialogue could happen? Or would you envision that within your family, your community, or what? And go ahead, Bernice. Go ahead, Bernice. I saw her about to respond.
Well, no, because I have a whole.
You're a descendant too. So.
I'm a descendant. I'm a descendant, and I have found plantation records, of which there are more than 200 enslaved people. And once I give this presentation and tell people about the slave owners, of which the people in South Carolina will know who they are,
Yes.
then my goal is to try to get as many descendants as possible to come together, because we need to talk to each other. We are the descendants of those that enslaved us, of this wealthy families, those two wealthy families.
Still family, yes.
And I feel that we need to talk. We need to share our stories with each other, because it lifts us all up. We have survived. We are the descendants. And, you don't have to be a descendant of an enslaver to make this happen. You could be a descendant of an enslaved person, and you can make it happen. But we do need to come together. I think it's very powerful. It's supportive, and it's something that's needed.
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that.
We will not be erased.
Yes. And I think there's an ownership that I think is necessary, and a reclamation.
Reclamation.
I'm like,
we got it.
Of the history that has to be done, right? You have to take ownership of it again, because there is a very active force trying to erase this information, but this information is our information, right? So you have to take an active part of it in it, own it, and be willing to face whatever realities that present itself, and kind of disengage in that cognitive dissonance, that urge that is like, it's telling me something about myself that makes me feel uncomfortable, and do it anyway. Do it afraid, do it anyway, because you might be able to shut certain things down or cut off certain flows of information, but you can't cut them all off. And I think if we are able to actively engage in our own preservation of our information, our history, and keep these channels open, they won't be able to close those doors, and more flow of information can happen. And I think that there's a real fear that when we begin to open up these channels of information, that it will uncover some ugly truths that people are scared to really talk about. But as someone in the legal profession, it's important. I know it's important to have the tough conversation, right?
And we already know it's ugly. We already know. We've seen it on TV, and Keme commented about a journalist, and we're getting this all the time. So we somewhat should be a little prepared and expect it, and then be able to somewhat handle it, so we learn that knowledge and stuff. So,
but it's the people like me who are not professional genealogists that hold these records. They're the ones that have to prepare themselves, right, for what could happen by opening up those channels of information. And what I'm saying is that they should do that work. If that means that you have to sit with it the same way I have to sit with it, so that we can move forward and have that freedom of information, then it should be done.
And that comes back to the talking, communicating, the dialogue amongst everybody. So I'm gonna,
Jamila, something that you said really resonated with me. So to explain to everyone, part of the connection that we shared was visiting the White Reinhardt Informal Family Cemetery, where we realized there were unmarked graves of formerly enslaved people that we reasonably assumed were connected to all of us. So we had a ceremony, a kind of co-created informal ceremony, and we raised their names. And for me, this was both a literal and metaphorical commemoration of stolen histories, because this doesn't again, it doesn't hurt anyone, right? In that cemetery there were established gravestones of people with their names on, so okay, we understand that they've contributed to America,
sure,
or the world. What about the people that we've never named? Who are they? Because they are us, and they deserve to be named. And that's actually what this is about. So this wider political discussion that we're kind of alluding to around, which stories get told. Well, forever and a day, there's a whole bunch of stories that have never been told and never been appreciated, and there are people, and we need to surface them and elevate them.
I'm gonna say amen to that.
Yeah.
And
this story is a global story. Like,
it
it's
is
a global story. We're all interconnected through this tragedy, right? That happened. So it's, when you tell the story, what I would like to see is more of telling a more complete story. That's part of the thing that I appreciate about this project, is getting more of a complete story, because our story didn't start in slavery. We went through slavery, but that's not where my family started. So getting an understanding of the complete story is also powerful, but it involves a broader global context that I appreciate that Keme, family history kind of allows to give insight to.
absolutely. So Karen Berry in the audience has a question. And this might be directed to Bernice somewhat. How do I find the deed of emancipation for Sophie Abney, who bought her freedom around 1810 in Edgefield County? She migrated to Ohio around 1820. Couldn't find her in that record on Ancestry.
Have you reached out to the Historical Society to find out what information they have, as well as the Old Edgefield District Genealogical Society? They may have additional information, because they do have family books, and they do have a variety of information that may be of help to you.
So thank you for that.
Tanya Guy is the head of the Genealogical Society, and she's also head of the archives.
And I will say, for this as a side note, Karen, that last name, Abney, that's the French Huguenots that came over here when dirt was turning over, and they came into Virginia. So I'm just letting you know that Abney is very prevalent and so forth. But anyway, let me go to the next question. Claude says, most of us can get back to the slave master. Beyond that, you will have to be extremely lucky. I really have a response to this, but you guys are the guest. Is there luck in this?
I don't know how much luck there is, but there's certainly a lot of research and analysis. And you have to just keep looking at it and validating the information you have. I think that part of us get into the whole idea that our ancestor took the slave owner's last name, and we get stuck in looking in that direction rather than looking more broadly, that maybe they didn't. That might not be their surname. It may be a totally different surname, which forces us to start doing first name searches. But we have to find the documents that's going to lead us to the first name search. For example, I have a Freedman bank record. In that bank record, one of my great uncles named mother, father, sister, brothers, the works. And because he did that, I was able to match the names on the Freedman bank record with the names in the plantation record. Right? Just like that. So you have to also understand the various documents that have been created
Yes.
to help you go through that process. Because if you're not familiar with any of these documents, you're going to go through the rabbit hole of trying to find something that you may not be able to find unless you understand that records were created. There's a myth that we're not there. We are there. And you have to know what those records are.
And ask for
Well,
help.
you
Kind of
also
what
have to know-
Keme did. Ask for help, because there's a whole community like
Yeah.
Dr. Murphy and Bernice who have dedicated their entire lives to what you're just beginning to look into. Like we discussed earlier, there was 5 years worth of research that was there.
That was waiting.
That was waiting for me. So it's like sometimes you do have to get offline and
Yeah.
meet people or call people or talk to people, and not so much luck, but just tapping into the wealth of experience, and kind of paying homage to the resources and the effort, the people that have come before you to do the same thing.
And I'll make a strategy here is don't jump outside that box. That's a typical thing that people will say. You need to stay in that box and focus on that community and go deeper within what you find there instead of jumping around. You know, and doing strictly online research will make you jump all over the place.
Yeah.
You want to focus and tailor that research. I often say, make a research plan. What are the specific goals that you're looking for? And there's no such thing of a good goal saying, I want to know everything. No, take it step by step. You want to achieve, just like you said, you found that record, you found names and this, that, and other. Now, what are your questions about those people in the records?
Correct.
And this, that, and other, and build that. So the next question is from Treva. She says, my DNA is 37% Nigerian, but no idea which clan because Ancestry has listed 6 possible clans. Any idea if more Nigerians are taking the DNA test today? So I'm going to look at Keme and also Bernice. This is a good question, very valid. So thank you, Treva, for that, because there's different types of tests that are out there, and then to learn about the clans. And I'm going to throw it back to you guys now.
So, there clans can sometimes, there is a fair amount of intermarriage, right? And there always was. So you can kind of get slightly blocked by staying stuck in that world. And I must say, I'm not particularly familiar with how the different DNA analysis providers, Ancestry being one of them, of course, how the different brands process the information differently. What I do know is that it's often the social information that's gathered alongside the DNA that is actually really helpful, because that's the research, the people that have received their DNA and then are building family trees out and trying to get information and put it together. That's often as useful as the DNA itself. But Bernice knows much more than I do about this.
Well, I want to say that I have 32% Nigerian, and I've actually had Nigerian DNA connections. I've actually communicated with people. So you almost need to start searching for your African cousins that have tested with the various DNA sites.
Yes.
Because I've connected with the Nigerian cousins. I've connected with the cousin from Senegal. I've connected with the cousin from Burkina Faso. They're there. They are testing also.
Yes.
And the information that's transmitted, once you make that connection, is just amazing.
So
because you get a history. You get a history that you would never have gotten if you had not connected with the people. So it's wonderful to see that you have the various percentages, but start looking for your African cousins.
Yes. And you're bringing up points here from all of you. Number one, and I'm going to say, get a genealogy buddy, join the groups. You got to start that dialogue with someone else that's going through some of the same things you might be going through, either learning about a specific county or a state or whatever it is. And we can't leave out the social media opportunities that pretty much, if your county genealogy doesn't, or genealogical society doesn't have a page on Facebook, then you need to start one. They will come. If you are researching Edgefield, South Carolina, look on Facebook, Threads, whatever it is that you use that's out there. And don't forget, I'm going to say just the typical newspapers. If you got an account with Ancestry, remember they own newspaper.com. And so make sure you're getting access to that. And the thing of it is, if it's not there, it's upon you to start that and start that dialogue, start that communication. There's 35, I believe, OGS chapters throughout the United States. OGS is Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society. The Center for Family History at the museum, International African American Museum, has a blog. They have resources. They've got USCT pension records online. Tap into the state archives, local historical societies, as we're talking about. And don't forget the little public library, because folks tend to leave their family papers with public libraries, organizations, your lineage societies. Start asking a bunch of questions. And so I think as we're wrapping this up, unless there's anything else each of you would like to say, as far as what would you like to make sure someone, listening to the recording takes away from your discussion today. I give you that opportunity now. I don't have any more questions that are in the chat, but I will give Keme, I'll let you go first. If there's one thing you would like an audience person to take away, what would it be?
I have learnt and grown and healed so much and continue to do so. And it has been the most challenging and the most beautiful thing I've ever done.
Absolutely. Jamila?
I agree with Keme. It's definitely been the challenging but most rewarding thing I've probably done thus far on a personal level. There is not a bit of information that I regretted receiving. Mm-hmm. And there has not been something that I've done in my quest for understanding about who I am and where I come from that I regret. Mm-hmm. So though there's challenges and emotional toll that at certain points I had to address and still have to sit with, the payoff was far exceeded, for me at least, the challenges that I've faced just being an amateur sleuth family genealogist. And I would go out into the world and look forward to finding out who you are, mm-hmm. And where you come from. It's not a mistake that you're looking for this information. It's an important thing that we do as humans to record who we are and where we come from. And, if you feel that call to do that, you should do that for you and for your family. And I find in my family, there's always one of us. And I'm sure you all probably have something like that going with you. And that's why you're joining us today. But definitely follow the leads.
Follow the lead. That's a good one. Bernice? Take away.
Don't give up. That your ancestors are out there waiting for you. Some people may say you find them when they want you to find them.
Mhm.
They say something differently, but the information is there. Reach out to others that may be able to help you.
Mhm.
Study your community, really understand where your ancestors came from, and then be willing to share the information that you gained once you have done your research. And you may make mistakes. You can always correct those mistakes.
Absolutely.
Don't worry that, oh my God, I've done the wrong thing. No, you haven't. Just keep doing it.
Yes.
And for those who are descendants of enslavers, you may get a message from somebody like me saying, did your family own slaves? Don't run away from me.
Yeah.
Don't say, I don't know anything about that. You do know something.
Yeah.
If you don't, go find out. Because if you're related to me and you are not African American, then we have a history that we need to know. Let's do it.
And you never know what little nugget
Yeah.
that you have might unlock for the
It
other.
might bring it together.
Mhm.
Yes.
So for now, I want to thank you, each of you, for your vulnerability, your wisdom, and I hope people, I took notes, and also the courage in sharing this journey that you all have been on. We heard today how threads of history are not just recorded in archives. They live in the lives and identities of these descendants. So we've learned how confronting the difficult truths of the past is not just an act of division, but it is one of connection. So when we face history honestly, like everybody talked about today, we're going to build those bridges that are between people and families and communities. So the work of tracing enslavers or the enslaved is not easy. And today you heard different ways of what could be possible for one location. Make sure you check the location you're looking to research and see. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. But again, Bernice, I think, brought out about the accountability. Accept that accountability challenge and to recognize the humanity of all those who came before us. But as we've seen today, it holds the power to foster some healing, some understanding, and some hope. So let's leave here being inspired to continue this type of work, uncovering, acknowledging, and sharing the stories that we are trying to learn about so that the ties that bind us may ultimately bring us closer together. I want to thank the audience for being here and also invite you to come back in June, on June 21st, for our next podcast with Kenyatta Berry. She is the former host of the Genealogy Roadshow and also podcast with Kenyatta. So till next time, happy hunting and thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thanks for joining.